From the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
It's back-to-back victories for the Tiger Cats behind a record-setting performance by Bo. Mike O'Shea rolls the dice and the Bombers come up empty. The Alouettes introduce Davis Alexander, and are the Red Blacks really for real? These issues and questions will be explored and answered right now on the CFL This Week. Good day, Three Down football fans. This is the top weekly CFL podcast that features the top broadcasters, insiders, and columnists from all over the country. On this week, one of my favorites, and he's looking well-rested. Look at that background. It looks so nice out in BC. He's had a bye week, so he's all fired up. The voice of the BC Lions, Bob Marjanovich.
Fired up, dude. I'm ready for detox. I just spent a week in Cabo, so if I make it through this in 45 minutes, give me a medal at the end.
Folks, when it comes to sports in the peg, he's certainly in the know, and he's got you covered. Joey Slattery, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
And straight out of Calgary, he's the host of the popular Couch Potato Diary podcast. Peter Klein, certainly appreciate your participation.
Happy to be back. Glad my rookie performance earned another callback, so I'm excited for today.
You were on the list there, partner. Let's get right at it, though, guys. Aging like a fine wine, what's impressed you about Bo Levi Mitchell's resurgence with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Peter? He looks good.
He does. He looks really good. Being based out here in Calgary, I've seen a lot of good Bo Levi Mitchell, and this is good Bo Levi Mitchell. And there's a couple of things that have caught my eye, but the thing that has really impressed me about what he has done so far is he has kind of done it for the most part without Tim White. You would assume that if Bo Levi Mitchell is putting on these record-setting numbers and finding somewhere the fountain of youth out there in Southern Ontario, you would think that, okay, well, Tim White is going to be having some amazing numbers. And you look at 7 games, 374 yards, there were some stretches probably where that's a 2-game total for him. And so for Bo Levi Mitchell to still be doing this and having what everyone presumed to be the number one pass catching option out in Hamilton at the start of the season, kind of having a bit of a down year, it just makes it that much more impressive. And I think for Hamilton Tiger Cats fans, I think it kind of gives you hope seems like a bit too much, but it gives you a bit of optimism that, okay, if Tim White can really get going, then maybe this offense really opens up now, you know?
You know, Joey, the record certainly doesn't reflect it, but he is on pace yardage-wise for the most of his entire career to go along with 17 touchdown passes and just 7 interceptions.
No, I mean, he's on pace to have his years better than, 2016 and 2018, when he was finishing up his better years with Calgary before he was shipped out. But the thing for me is, he's 34. I refuse to think that is old because I'm only a few years older than him, and I refuse to let go of the dream that I cannot just step on a field and potentially with practice do what he does. But it's amazing what he's been doing with Hamilton. I mean, the game against Edmonton has struggled, sure, but I mean, the protection that he's had and being able to have the reads has been awesome for him, right? I mean, when he's got time, we've seen his arm. I mean, he can throw for long yards. He makes accurate passes, and he seems to be in his groove, right? I like what he's doing. I think it brings a good veteran presence to the Ticats, coming off a down year, and he wasn't able to play last year. And that's another big thing for me, the adversity this guy's faced from how it ended with Calgary to the injuries with last year, cutting his season short. Now he's got time. He didn't have his top receiver, as mentioned there by Peter, but last game, 5 touchdown passes. Tim White caught 2 of them. Now, the record, they're last in the East, 2-5. Sure, it's still early in the season. The championships are not won in July. If they can get some momentum going here and Tim White can get going, this could be a dangerous team. And it kind of seems like the power shifting a little bit from west to east this year. We're seeing a lot stronger competition in the East, but Hamilton's still in the mix. I mean, a big game coming up this week. But I really like what I'm seeing from Bo Levi Mitchell, and I think this is a testament to some of the quarterbacks in the new age, right? I don't think your mid-30s is necessarily the end if you're taking care of yourself and you're surrounded with weapons, and Bo Levi Mitchell is taking a page out of that. Another interesting note with Bo Levi Mitchell, kind of seems like, we saw it with Zach Collaros coming to Winnipeg, not much going on in his career. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen. Leads him to 4 straight Grey Cups. Cody Fajardo had so much struggles in Saskatchewan, goes to Montreal, ends up winning a Grey Cup. I mean, if that trend continues, Hamilton Ticats fans might get a little excited. Doesn't look like it just yet, but let's let that season pan out a little bit. see where it goes, but I'm really happy, and it's good to see Bo Levi Mitchell having such a great start to the season.
Bob, Vernon Adams Jr., I mean, clearly, in my opinion, the leader for the MOP right now, but Bo's kind of knocking on his door a little bit when it comes to statistics, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Bo Levi Mitchell, a couple things come to mind. First off, victory lap and taking an L, right? When he was in Calgary, I remember turning to Julio Caravetta and saying he's not going to finish the year as the starter. And he wasn't. He didn't. Jake Mayer came in that year, and we all know what happened there. I also said that Taylor Powell would be the starting quarterback for the Tiger Cats by midseason. That's not clearly good. That's clearly not going to happen, so I'll take the L on that one. I think the big thing, guys, is the work that Scott Milanovic has done with them, right? I mean, that's one thing what has changed. Scott Milanovic, he's a quarterback whisperer. I think it was Suits was talking on one of the TSN broadcasts about how they worked on his footwork, right? And that's one thing. If you look at Bo Levi Mitchell this year, I think his accuracy has improved, and I think a lot of that has to do with the mechanical work that he's done with Scott Milanovic.
And you look at Milanovic too, Bob, that's the same thing. Milanovic, you look at the work that he did years ago with Anthony Calvillo and how strongly his career ended. I mean, he retired at 41 years old, right? 34, if he's playing till 41, he's got plenty of track left. But you're right. I think the Milanovic factor plays a huge factor with how he's worked with quarterbacks. And, maybe that's part of the gift of, coming into Hamilton and playing with a coach that can revive things, see things a little differently with a new organization, a new scheme and everything else. Working with a new coach, there's a lot of excitement there too. So I think Milanovic, I agree with you there, has a huge part in this, in helping Bo Levi Mitchell get back to that form.
The other thing I'll throw into the mix, and I don't know about Hamilton, I haven't looked at their yak yardage, but you look at some of the quarterbacks around the league, particularly Cody Fajardo. I looked at his numbers in terms of the percentage of his passing yards that are from yak yards. Cody Fajardo was up there. I think he was well over 50%. Vernon Adams is only like 32 or 20, 25 or whatever. And, when I look at what they're doing in Montreal, they're getting the ball in the hands of their playmakers, whether it's Philpott, Keon, Julian Grant, you name it. We're seeing a lot more of these quick hitting hitches, slants, whatever, those real quick passes. And the Lions have had a lot of difficulty with that this year, particularly with receivers running across the formation and catching the ball on the far side flat or those hitch screens. And I asked TJ Lee, I go, what's happening on those plays that, is allowing teams to go for big gains? And I think what you're seeing is a shift in offensive philosophy where they are trying to expose the tackling skills of DBs, right? And as a result, you're seeing a lot of these guys like Philpott's he's feasted this year on yards after catch in Montreal. And as a result, you're seeing some of these passing numbers inflated. And conversely, I think it's one of the big reasons why you see the sack numbers really down this year as well.
Well, Bo's only been sacked 10 times this year. And for a guy that doesn't like to run, even though he's seemingly wanting to run out of the pocket a little bit more than we've seen him in the last couple of years, I think there is something to be said about that there, Bob, because you look at the targets that he's leaning on, and it's not just one guy. He's finding guys like Hakanavanu. Bridges has been a great rookie this year, Keandre Smith, and it is just sort of spreading the ball around and letting them do the work in essence, and finding the open guy. And I think in Coach Milanovic's system, there is something to be said with that. It's like we don't need to go up top all the time. And every once in a while, he will go long just to sort of, feel out that defense. But it really is working for him, Peter.
No, it is. And I do think that there were some times out here in Calgary where there was a little bit of the Cayley, Texas gunslinger in there, and he just wanted to just grip it and rip it and throw it downfield. And so there's absolutely been some maturing going on. And to Joey's point about the adversity that he has faced, like I was lucky enough to host radio shows with him out here in Calgary. And aside from seeing him push the limits of the amount of swears that a program director will let the starting quarterback get away with before they actually step in and say something, I also saw someone who was like very committed to taking care of himself. And I think when you saw how last season ended and his frustration after the playoffs, that can go one of two ways. It can be, okay, well, screw this. I'm Bo Levi Mitchell. I'm just going to be me. And that's going to have to be good enough. Or I need to change something. And he clearly went out and changed something. He looks more comfortable as an athlete over this season than he did the last couple of years. And he's still not running a lot, but he's at least running some. And it's enough that it kind of keeps it in the back of the heads of defenders. And also, to your point, kind of moves things around, changes the angles on the field a little bit, and finds receivers open downfield. So he, I think, really put in a commitment this offseason to getting himself back into the shape that he was 5-6 years ago, whether it's yoga or just he actually found a literal fountain of youth or whatever it is. He has found something that makes him just a bit more loose as an athlete, and it looks a bit more comfortable out there, more so than it did the last couple of years.
I think Peter makes a great point, and the thing is, he talks about change, right, Peter? And for an athlete who's had success, like Bo Levi Mitchell, won Grey Cups, won MOPs, you have this recipe for success, and all of a sudden now, later in your career, you've got to change some things. And that's very, very hard to do for an athlete. I mean, I remember like even coaching in college at University of British Columbia, and like, you're trying to teach guys new technique. They just revert back to their old technique because that's what they're comfortable with. They don't want to venture out and try something that they don't trust. And for Bo Levi Mitchell to make these changes in terms of his program, off-field training, you name it, or even what he's doing on the field, in terms of mechanics, it's pretty big, and he should be commended for it.
If you don't evolve, you die, right? Like in this industry. And here's a guy who is got some maturity now. He's played a long time, as you said. He's kind of experienced everything you'd want to in the CFL as a quarterback. But then when you go through a major change where you're going to a whole new organization, all new players, everything else, I wonder how much of an influence that has on you too, knowing that your years are numbered. I feel like once they hit that 31, 32 mark, the end starts becoming clear, right? I only have so many years left, and I want to make the most of it. You're right. In terms of it's hard for players to make that change, and guys get set in their ways. There's old habits, especially when you're at the pro level for, 10 years plus, you built some habits. But if you're able to break those, work with what you have, and be open to trying some new things, you'd be shocked at what can happen. And that's the thing with him that's really impressed me. He's gone with it seems like a very open mind. He seems to be having fun out there too. I mean, looking at the post-game interview with Tom Gazzola afterwards, he's laughing and things like that after the win in Edmonton. But it seems like it's almost a resurgence / reinvention with what he's doing, and it seems like he's having fun. And when you get a quarterback like that that's feeling comfortable, and as I mentioned earlier, he's been getting a lot of time to throw that ball, and football starts getting fun, that's when you start seeing the success rolling in.
And don't kid yourself either. Despite the fact that he's won Grey Cups and MOPs, he went to Hamilton. It's a new team. When you talk to players, when they go to a new team, there's always this feeling that they have to prove themselves to their new teammates and to give them reference points of success that they're having with that team. You could be the greatest player in the world, and if you show up on a new team, you still feel like you have to prove yourself to your teammates. And I think that's what Bo Levi Mitchell's kind of gone through, and now he has that reference point, that success, and he's probably a lot more comfortable with the Tiger Cats offense.
Well, Bo's having a lot of fun. The Tiger Cats have a lot of fun putting up 44 points on Sunday in E-Town, but not having a lot of fun are the Edmonton Elks. Let's be honest, the 0-7 right now. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, $500,000 spent to bring him in by Chris Jones, thinking they needed that veteran guy, a guy that's won before, but it's not working out. Let's be honest with the winless record. So in this contest, in the loss against the Tiger Cats, we saw Tre Ford, someone that a lot of people have been asking for, someone that we saw last year that was rather exciting and fun to watch. And he came in the fourth quarter and threw, a couple of touchdown passes and looked really solid. In fact, was it 3 touchdown passes? And I got to ask, guys, when you're looking at the future of this team, immediate future, I'll start with you, Bob, on this. Does it have to be MBT and then on a short leash and then have Tre Ford in your back pocket? Or do you make that move to the youngster right now?
Well, let's put things into context. What was the score heading into the fourth quarter? Right?
No, it was like 44.
Yeah, the game was over, right? Yeah. I think, is Ford a tremendous athlete? Of course he is. Do you want to give him an opportunity and probably increase his role in the offense? I would say so. Chris Jones was under a lot of pressure this year to win, and the reason he brought McLeod Bethel-Thompson into the fold was the fact that he felt that gave them the best opportunity to win. Remember, coaches want trust from their athletes, right? MBT, he's like a proven commodity, whereas Ford, he's still a work in progress in the sense that he hasn't proven himself at the CFL level. He's got a tremendous amount of talent. We all know that. But I think in terms of the future for the Edmonton Elks, I think they need to start getting this kid some more reps and getting him meaningful reps. Reps when the game is on the line, reps when it's tight. I'm not going to buy too much into the fact that he threw 3 touchdowns in that it's the fourth quarter. The game's over. You're losing by 36 points, whatever it is. I mean, you have to put an asterisk beside that performance. But I would probably wind up giving him some more reps. And I said, again, give him meaningful reps.
Pete?
Yeah, it's an interesting spot out there because, I don't think McLeod Bethel-Thompson has been the reason why Edmonton has been in the situation that they are in. But also, I don't think he should start again. I think that this is now the time to go with Tre Ford. This season, you don't want to say it's just done because there's still a lot of football left. We're not even at Labor Day, and it's not like the other couple of teams in the bottom part of the West are running away with things. So it is still there. But I just think when you have the success that Ford had last season and now the lack of success this year, that this can be something that revitalizes things a little bit. And I understand $500,000 is a whole lot of money to pay someone to not play football for you. I would gladly take $500,000 to not play football. But this is a situation with Tre Ford where I think you have to legitimately see what you have with him. And I think the only way you do that is to roll him out there with the live shots and have him as a starter. We have seen as a sport, football has a bit of a difficult time with developing quarterbacks who aren't just your starter. You guys have all been to practices. The starter reps take up a whole lot of space out there. And then at the end of it, it's okay. And you can go play with whoever. I think to really see what you have in this quarterback, you need to have him out there. You need to have him starting games. And another part of this, when they go to the establishing shots of gigantic Commonwealth Stadium, and you see the two guys in the booth, and it's empty behind him. And I'm not saying Tre Ford is the Rolling Stones and he's going to pack that place, but what you have now isn't working. And I think given how things were going before Chris Jones, given how things went with Chris Jones, I think you have to kind of really reestablish this is a new era. Look, we may not win, but we're going to be fun while we don't win instead of just being blah while we don't win. I think there's a bit of a marketing aspect to this as well.
100%. I agree with both of you. I think he has to have the opportunity to prove himself. It's not proven. I agree. Fourth quarter stats, put an asterisk beside it if you want, but you can't doubt his talent. And I do want to see what he can do there. And to your point, Peter, put butts in seats. It's a beautiful mosaic spread of yellow and green, but I don't care to see it, right? If they can fill those seats and, start getting to those glory days that they had back in the 80s where you've got full stadiums, it'd be awesome, right? Then even not so distant future when they were competing for Grey Cups. But since 2020, they've returned after the pandemic. This team is 11 wins total? They're 0-7 this year. I mean, what do you have to lose at this point? Put McLeod Thompson on the bench for a game. And if Tre Ford really doesn't do what he's supposed to do or really, poops the bed, so to speak, then, hey, put him back in. But right now, if you're Jarius Jackson, this is what everybody wants. I was in Edmonton just a few weeks ago, guest hosting on a radio show, and this was still the Chris Jones era. They were 0-5, and people then still asking, why not Tre Ford? Let's put him in. He was exciting last year. People will go for the excitement factor. He's a Canadian quarterback. That's the other thing, too. We don't have a lot of those. There's a celebration in that as well, and he's good enough to at least get the shot. Edmonton needs a resurgence. To me, it's a slam dunk decision for Jarius Jackson to just put him in and see where it rolls because you're the interim head coach anyway. Chris Jones stuck with his guys, and now it's an opportunity for you to make a big impact and, really shake things up. And what do you have to lose if it doesn't work out? I mean, the coach has already been fired. You have an interim tag. It needs a shakeup, and nothing has worked this decade for the Edmonton Elks. So shake something up and take those chances. I don't see any bad in putting him in for the start. And I think if he weren't to start this week, then I would really start questioning the Edmonton Elks and the organization in terms of the decision-making.
Just on the basic, guys, looking at obviously being a part of that game, I felt sorry for Elks fans. I really did. Seeing, the city of champions with people with their bags on their head. And then when Tre came in, two things I noticed, obviously because he moved the football and touchdowns were scored, the crowd were on their feet and they were seemingly enjoying themselves. Like it's something so basic. But I thought the players on offense, at least, maybe even defense, they looked electrified on the sidelines, which leads me to believe, what are they thinking, Bob?
Well, I mean, they're thinking that he's obviously a great athlete. I mean, we can all agree on that, right? So, but again, I just look at that game. And the thing is with Edmonton, too, they've been so close this year. 3 straight walk-off field goals. I think they've lost every game by a score, maybe other than the Hamilton game. And I might be incorrect. There might be 2. And it's funny, I talked to Lions head coach Rick Campbell about this yesterday at practice. You know, in that game that the Lions recently lost to Calgary, they had so many opportunities to win it in the last 4 or 5 minutes. They had, you know, some chances, turnovers, whatever, and they blew those chances. And I said to him, you know, it's funny. If Seontae Evans falls in that football and they make 2 completions, Sean White comes out, kicks a field goal, everyone's talking about how great the Lions were and how they found a way to win and this and that. And you have to look at the body of work, and that's the job of a coach. It's not to look at perhaps just what happens in the final 3 or 4. You have to look at the entire body of work, right? And when you look at the Edmonton Elks' entire body of work, it really hasn't been worthy of a winless record. I mean, this team could easily have won 2, 3, 4 games by now, right? So that's, I think, when you look at this team and its decision-making process, I don't think you can just kind of come in and blow things up. You've got some things going. You just have to fine-tune it and find a way to win those close games.
Just a counterpoint to that. Sorry, Joey. Just a counterpoint to that, though. I do think you bring in McLeod Bethel-Thompson to win those close games. And while we certainly could, I don't think we have enough time left on this show to critique all of the moves that Chris Jones made. MBT was out there making some crucial mistakes at some of those times as well. Mm-hmm. And I am not saying that Tre Ford is going to come in and Tom Brady this thing and just be a perfect quarterback. But I do think when you have a veteran quarterback, a quarterback who has led his team to at least to the Grey Cup game, you are hoping for someone who can come in those late game situations and not throw a crucial interception against the Saskatchewan or not have some of those drive killing type of plays that McLeod Bethel-Thompson has had. And like I said, I don't think he is the biggest problem there, but he has not been part of the solution in these fourth quarters. And yes, Tre Ford could come in and just absolutely lose it. But we saw he had a decent sample size last year, and it was something that you can build off of. Like there is something there. And I will say, out here in Calgary, getting ready for the Labor Day Classic, they don't necessarily share the same sympathy for Elks fans that have been expressed on this program. But I know that fans out here in Calgary would be significantly more concerned if Tre Ford was at quarterback than if McLeod Bethel-Thompson was. And a Democratic poll maybe isn't the best way to choose your quarterback, but I do think when you see how things have gone, I think a little bit of extra electricity into this is probably something they need right now.
Yeah, and I'd say this team, I mean, clearly been rebuilding forever. I mean, just put him out there, let him make the mistakes. You're 0-7. So let's say he does have that close game and you throw the interception. This is how quarterbacks learn, right? Put him out there and see what he's made of and how he's going to adjust when he makes those mistakes. Another thing, help out your marketing team. To get people into the building is really hard right now for the Elks. And one thing we know about Edmonton, when I was working in Edmonton, before the Oilers were going on a Stanley Cup run, people were showing up to watch the best players in the world, the most entertaining players in the world. When you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and I don't mean to put this to hockey, but what I'm getting at is the fans will go out to watch excitement. Not necessarily wins. Of course, they're passionate fans. They want the wins, but initially they need to be entertained to give them hope that they're going to win. And for me right now, the only one that really gives you that's kind of on a platter is Tre Ford.
Yeah, but I'll make a counterpoint there, fellas. And the fact is, I don't think I've ever seen a coach make a decision based on what the marketing team wants or, hey, let's put some butts in the stands. I think
if you want a job, you better think about it.
Well, I mean, you put butts in the stands by winning, right? That's the big thing. And does Tre Ford give them a better opportunity to win? We're going to find out. I'm agreeing with you. Give the kid a look, see what he can do. But I think when you look at this whole situation, the fact of the matter is McLeod Bethel-Thompson has shown that he can do it in the past. He has the trust of a guy like Jarius Jackson because he's done it. And that's the way coaches think. Tre Ford has yet to do it. And, do it over an extended period of time. But I think you're right. Throw him out there, see what he can do. Because right now, your season's lost. You're done. you might as well see if the kid can play or not, or at least give him some really much needed developmental time.
Just to put a bow on that, because I just want to tag along to that. This is also, he did it with another team, and Tre Ford seems to be Edmonton's guy. Like in terms of, the city, they really want to see him go in there. He has an opportunity to make this his team. He's got plenty career ahead of him. So that's another thing too. It's no respect to Bethel. I mean, he's played great. He's done a lot, but, coming to a new organization, after coming off, playing for Toronto where you were going after Grey Cups to being 0-7's got to be tough. But at some point you got to make the decision as an organization, as a coaching staff, who is going to be our guy for the long term. And I think right now, to your point, you have to give him a shot and just at least be sure that he is not, if he's not, and move on from it and figure it out, or give him the shot. Because if he's there sitting and waiting and then signs with another team and goes off, Edmonton fans are not going to be happy. So give him a chance.
If it comes down to wins and losses, and I think one of you guys, Joey, I think you brought it up. I think it's 10 wins since the 2020. Like it's not a great number. If it's 10 or 11, it's in that range. Tre Ford has 4 of those wins that came last year. So I don't know how you don't lean on a guy that's won the majority of the games. Tyler Cornelius, he came in there, got a big contract extension. He won 1 game. That Jared Dagey guy didn't win any game. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has won none. He's done nothing. So I don't know. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's about the win. But anyway,
I agree with you. Track record's there.
Anyway. Funny thing happened in that wild game earlier back last week with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Montreal is that Caleb Evans did not get the job done in replacement of Cody Fajardo, who's on the 6-game injured list with a bad hamstring. Enter someone by the name of Davis Alexander. I'm not sure if you guys knew anything about him. And he put on a second half performance was just outstanding. 15 out of 18, 178 yards passing, no interceptions, 2 touchdowns, and the Alouettes win. Joey, should we buy into this performance?
First off, you weren't watching Portland State all those years when he was out there throwing the ball around? Come on, man. No, hey, great performance. But this kind of speaks to what Bob was saying about Tre Ford. Like, the difference is he came back and helped the team win. But, he's coming in as a third-string quarterback. And I think sometimes when you have a guy like that come in, it can spark your offense in the sense that, okay, we've got our third stringer in, like we really got to be sharp or this can get ugly. And then if he makes a few plays and gets his confidence up, man, like, it's almost like you're playing with house money as a third string quarterback. I'm not going to crown him for real or whatever after 1 game. I mean, it's great. Give him a start, see where it goes. If, Fajardo's clearly their guy when he comes back. I mean, if he can hold you off during the rest of this 6-game injury, reserve that he's on the injured reserve list and keep Montreal afloat and in the lead, then that's great. I mean, he did play, 178 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Very impressive. And I just want to see more of it, if I'm going to be totally honest. It was enjoyable to watch. He seems like he's very poised for a young guy. Did not look shaken in any way, shape, or form. He got the crowd buzzing and got Montreal back in the game. And I'd like to see more, but I think it's way too early to think, crown this guy is for real or what his future might be. I'd like to see more of a sample size, and he has a really good opportunity here ahead.
Peter, Saskatchewan's defense is no joke. Like, they're pretty good. And he sliced and diced them. It was surprising.
Yeah, and it's a Saskatchewan defense that has kind of honed in on turnovers. And when you have a third-string quarterback coming in from prestigious Portland State, you do worry sometimes about turnovers happening. And he was very smart with the football. And this kind of goes back to something that we talked about last time I was here when we were talking about the great start that Montreal had and how for real it was. And I kind of mentioned that even if Cody Fajardo turns into a pumpkin here at some point, that this team is still really, really well built. That defense with the acquisition of Sankey last year is just terrifying to play against. And you have the pass catching weapons, like Bob mentioned before. You can throw the ball 2 yards to Philpott and he will take it 56 yards. And all of a sudden things are moving really, really well. Between him, Julian Grant, Fletcher, even Speaker is a really reliable 2nd and 5, move the chain sort of a target. They don't need him to come in here and be Cody Fajardo 2.0. Just don't screw it up. And that's kind of what Caleb Evans was doing, missing a lot of easy throws. And so I think that they had a game plan and a team around him that allowed him to thrive in this situation. And so if Fajardo is out for a couple of more weeks, this is someone who can at least keep their heads above water, so you don't have to force back in a guy who was playing at an MLP level. Obviously, they would like to have him back, but you don't have to bring him back when he's 85% if you have this kid playing at this level. So I don't know if we're going to be talking in 4 years about renaming the MLP award after him, because it is getting too unfair that he is winning it all the time. But I do think that he showed at least he can have a few more opportunities at this, and at least just like, even if it's white knuckle, just keep it between the white lines out there on the road.
Bob, in your time, I'm sure
I was just
career, you've seen tons of flashes in the pan.
Yeah,
should the Ticats be concerned?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I like the kid, especially what he did in the second half. But I was just laughing at Joey's comments about elevating your play, because it reminded me of something Rick Tocchet said. So just play with me here for a little bit. So when Demko got hurt this year, Artur Shilovs came into the fold and played, and Tocchet was like, "Oh, they love Shilovs. They'll block shots for him." And then people so they're not going to block shots for Demko. Oh no! And then he started talking about his time in Philly, and he said there were guys that wouldn't block shots for certain goalies, right? I mean, the fact that they didn't like the guy, they weren't a fan favorite, So talk about elevating your play for your teammates. I mean, clearly we saw it in Montreal, so I think they really like what Davis Alexander brings to the team in terms of his approach. But I think the big thing too, guys, we talked about it. Look at the reference point they have right now with Davis Alexander. Guy came in at halftime and takes his team on the way to a victory against one of the league's tougher defenses in terms of, ball hawks. Saskatchewan, they give up their yardage, but they kind of make up for it in terms of turnovers. So I think, for me, I'm a big Davis Alexander fan. When I first heard the name Davis Alexander, I thought I was looking at a Wimbledon result or something. He sounds like a tennis player more than a quarterback. But the fact is, the guy went out there and he produced, and he earned the trust of his teammates. And I think there's no way that you can go back to Caleb Evans after what Davis Alexander did.
Yeah, and those guys too, I mean, you think about it, like the third string quarterback's doing a lot in practice as well to help people prepare, right? I mean, that's another thing, is these guys see this guy in practice all the time, and when he's coming in, this guy is prepared, because you're only going to get that one opportunity. You're hoping for that one opportunity as a third string. How many teams go a full season without ever getting their third stringer in, unless it's for a rushing to get a first down or whatever the case may be? But when you have the opportunity, you make the most of it. So I'm thinking he's going in there very highly focused and highly detailed of what he wants to do and what he needs to do. And, hats off to him. He played really, really well in one half of football. So if he can pull it on, and keep going against Hamilton, then I think you've got something. But it gives me a little bit of a Drew Brown vibe, like when he was with Winnipeg. People were a little upset to see him go now that he's out in Ottawa and leading them. And I know we're going to talk about that a little later. But, maybe this is his opportunity. You get a few games. It's, you're not going to replace Fajardo, but if you can get a few games to build your highlight reel, who knows where it leads to your next contract.
It reminds me so much of last year, and we seem to have one of these every single season, and maybe even both the NFL and the CFL, where someone comes out of nowhere. It's quite a story. Last year it was Dustin Crum. Like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? What, the Cruminator? Like, it was so fun, but at some point we kind of realized that there are limitations. Now, I don't know, because the sample size is so small right now, and the performance was so great, Peter, that we have to give him his props. Like, he certainly deserves it. But I'll ask you this, though. I mean, it was such a short sample size, and he saved the day. The game was at home. Caleb Evans has won games in this league for both Montreal and both Ottawa. Yeah, he didn't play well through one half of football. Do you lose your, quote, starting job because Cody's not the guy, because of one guy that plays a solid half of football?
When you're not the usual starter, yes. Like it is when you come in as the backup, it's kind of your job to like I said, just keep it between the white lines. And he was actively holding them back in that game, I thought, with some of the throws that he was missing. And Alexander, as made up as that name sounds, Davis Alexander, and to the point of the Wimbledon one, I kind of went to, it sounded like one of those random name generator Madden games when like you're into the draft in year 18, and it's like, all right, I think we've broken this thing. We might need to start a new one here. That's the first place I went to, so different reference points. But I like he didn't do anything spectacular, right? Like it's not like Micah Johnson was coming in and he backflip barrel rolled over him and threw a pass. He was just throwing the football and his receivers were catching them. And that was 50% more than what Caleb Evans was doing, who was throwing the ball, and it was just going all over the place. And so I do think, while, yes, Caleb Evans has won games in this league, and I actually think there is something there with Evans that needs to be kind of molded a little bit. But I do think that when it is your job to come in for a guy in Cody Fajardo, who, like I said, was playing at an MOP level, it is your job to make sure that everything just runs smoothly, and he wasn't. So if Alexander comes out in his next game and throws 4 interceptions on 5 passes, then yeah, Caleb Evans, come right in. But for me right now, guys, he lost that job.
You know what? I'll say this too. It gave Montreal fans something to talk about on the way out of the stadium. I'll be full front. I'm a Boston Celtics fan when it comes to basketball. Kelly Olynyk is a fine NBA basketball player, but he's not a superstar. We talk about the Kelly game in 2017 where he had 12 points in 3.5 minutes and helped the Celtics win Game 7. He had his moment, and maybe this is a Davis Alexander moment, rather. And we'll see if it pans out to anything. But at the very least, as you say, just if you can go in there, grind out a few yards and a couple of touchdowns and make sure the defense is doing their end and you can win a few of these games and make sure that winning record's intact. Even better yet, you're still in first place when Fajardo gets back, then job well done.
All kinds of quarterback talk because of the way the games went last week, but I think we have to switch from the QBs. Maybe there will be some QB talk still, but to the coaches. And the guy in Winnipeg right now that's being questioned, again, a tough game, tied 13-13, 55 seconds left, Bob, in the game. They're knocking on the door. Comes down to 3rd down and 1 from the Argos 22. I would think that you would logically, or at least logic would tell you, take the points on the road and then rely on your defense for less than a minute. But Coach Mike O'Shea goes for it with Strevler. They get stuffed and eventually lose the game in overtime. Did that call on 3rd down and 1 surprise you, Bob?
No. I mean, you look at Chris Strevler this year. What was he, 15 for 15 on 3rd down conversions? He hadn't lost. I mean, he hadn't failed in a 3rd down conversion. I could see Mike O'Shea going for it. And if you ask anybody on that offense, anybody on that team, should they have gone for it on 3rd and 1? Every single player will say, yeah, come on, we're going to get a yard, no problem, right? The only thing that comes into the equation here, if that was a high-scoring game, right, like if it was 34-34 and both teams are moving the football, at that point, yeah, I want to run down the clock. I don't want to give the other team the football with them moving the football and scoring points. That wasn't that. I mean, this was a defensive struggle, right? I mean, your defense played outstanding in that football game. So even if Toronto got the ball back with 45 seconds, whatever, I think the defense for the Bombers would have held. So you can use that as a counterpoint. Now, I'll counterpoint it one more time. The concern that you have is Janarian Grant. He was held in check in that game, but if he ripped off a great return, then, of course, the Bombers might have been close to field goal range. So, again, if I'm looking at it from a the big question, would I've gone for it on 3rd and 1 with a guy that you have in Strevler? That's his only job to get yardage on 3rd and 1s. And the guy's been perfect all year long. I don't really question the call.
But Bob, you're at the 22. You're on the road. I mean, yeah, maybe in your home and, you got your home crowd there. Isn't the rule of thumb over the years, like, take the points on the road?
Take the points, but at the same time, you've got an automatic 1st down for the most part in Strevler, right? I mean, grind that clock down, right? And leave 4 seconds on the clock. But again, the counterpoint to that, and this is where I'm kind of like on the fence with this one, is the fact that your defense was so good in that game. I would have trusted my defense. Would you have trusted your defense in that situation? Would you have trusted your special teams and Janarian Grant? Personally, myself, I would have gone for it on 3rd and 1. But at the same time, I can see the counterpoint as well.
Joey, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not a rabbit out of the hat. I mean, it'd be one thing if we've never seen this before or was, out of character, but this is what the Bombers run often. They use their backup quarterback very often for these rush and sneaks. I mean, even Drew Brown last year, Dakota Prukop, how many touchdowns they got from those, 1-yard runs to the end zone. This is not something that is out of the blue for the Bombers. And this is something that's worked for them more often than not. So to be fair, Mike O'Shea did mention after the game that maybe, on a second thought, maybe I should have left it in my defense's hands. They were playing really well. I mean, that was probably the best game they played all season. But it's those habits. This is what's worked for you. I mean, this is a team that's gone to 4 Grey Cups. They've won 2 of them. They still have a lot of those main guys intact that are the core that have led this team on. So I think it's almost like a habitual thing where it's like, you know what, go for it. Because you're right, you grind down the clock. Because even if, let's just say, worst case scenario, they miss the field goal in the tie game, well, at least you still have, the overtime. But I think if it normally wins. I mean, this is a guy that would 9 times out of 10 going to make that conversion. He didn't do it this one time, so it looks really bad because the game was on the line. But there's plenty of opportunities to win this game. I mean, how many turnovers did the Bombers have throughout the game? I don't know if we can peg it on one coaching decision. There were a lot of careless turnovers in that game as well. Dembski had one. I mean, Wolotarski had one, but it was, a rough hit. Oliveira had one, and this guy's, the leading rusher. So, I mean, to peg it all down that, he cost him the game with the call may have had an effect. You can't guarantee that field goal was going to go in anyway, but you went with what your gut told you, and I can't fault him for that. This is a guy that knows his team, that has had a lot of success in the last, 4 or 5 years, and he went with what he thought would work. It didn't work. That's the risk of coaching and calling a play. And I don't put too much stock into it. In fact, I kind of respect the fact that he went with it and said, I'm going to put as much as I don't believe in my defense is going to make the stop. I think it's just, no, I'm going to put my guys in a situation that show them I trust them. Hey, Strev, go out, get me a first down. You didn't get it. That's tough. We'll get it next time, right? It's still early enough in the season. They're still working out some kinks, but I have no problem with that call, although it goes against, conventional thinking.
Pete, they got 2 wins. Pete, they have 2 wins. Mm-hmm. Winnipeg have 2 wins.
Yes. Yeah. And every week you keep thinking, okay, this is the week it's going to turn around. This is the week it's going to turn around. And then it doesn't. And I don't put any of that on Coach O'Shea. I think he is maybe the best coach in the Canadian Football League. I do think he erred on this one. But to Joey's point, he kind of erred on their identity, right? Like this is what we do. We go for it. And I am the last guy to say don't go for it on 3rd down. I think anytime a Canadian Football League team doesn't go for it on 3rd and less than 5, it's insanity. The field's huge. Get someone open. Mm-hmm. But that's another conversation for another day. I do think in this one, you do have to kind of look at the game situation. And I was getting the tweet ready joking, being like, did they give Nick Arbuckle too much time? Because the Toronto offense was just not moving at all. And your defense was absolutely stonewalling them. And even if Castillo misses that field goal, which again, by the way, he did a couple of times in that game, not just in overtime, but he had one in regulation. So to the grander point of all of this, it shouldn't have come down to one coaching decision. Don't fumble the football every time you get 10 yards away from the line of scrimmage, and you're probably not in this situation. But I do think when you see how well your defense is played, quite frankly, how bad the other team's offense has been playing, and to Toronto's credit, how good their defense was playing with Seresna back on that defensive front. There was a couple of times where they made a couple of big stands, and Oliveira busted a couple, and Strevler had some success in those short yardage ones. But to me, just given how that game was going and how kind of tough points were to get, even if Castillo misses it and just blasts the heck out of it through the end zone, I'm still comfortable up by 1 in that situation because of how good my defense has been and how difficult it was for Toronto to move the ball. So while I would love to use this platform to tell every coach out there, 3rd and 3, just go for it. In this situation, I do think that kicking the field goal would have been the way to go.
Hey, Peter, are you one of these guys that plays Madden or NCAA 25 and never punts?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I 100%. I gone for it 4th and 15 from my own 25 because I just missed a pass. Yes, I have. 100% I have. Yeah.
Didn't Belichick go for it in 4th and 11 from his own 20 once? I mean,
yeah, a genius decision. The best football mind of all time. Yes, no, I find the lowest ranked punter and whoever is the cheapest because the game requires me to have one. Mm-hmm. But they do not get used. No.
The one thing I want to bring up too, you said the 2 wins. The one thing I felt about this play is, you hear the term play to win, don't play not to lose. And I feel like in that moment, he was playing for the win. He was taking the gamble to get that first down, burn some more clock so they could walk away with that win and not have to put more pressure on their defense. Maybe that did play a great game. So for me, it didn't look like, the field goal leaves the time on the clock. They haven't had a ton of luck this year. So maybe it's like, you know what, we are going to go for the win and just cement this so we can walk out with a sure win, and it backfired. So to me, it's that's the risk you take when you're going for the win. But I think that was part of that in the mindset. We have 2 wins. We need to get a third. Let's just go get that first down and go from there. And it didn't pan out.
Is it official, guys? Look at the Ottawa Red Blacks after back-to-back 4-14 wins. They haven't been in the playoffs since winning the Grey Cup a number of years ago. I mean, they've got guys like Cahill Pimpleton. Have you ever heard of him, Bob? Like, where do you place Ottawa in the I'll put it this way. Do you see them as elite?
Not elite. I see them as a good football team. I don't see them at the level of, say, the Montreal Alouettes, who to me are right now the elite team in the CFL. And then maybe you have your next tier with BC, Saskatchewan. Maybe you throw Toronto in that mix. And I think Ottawa might be just below it because they don't have the track record of the aforementioned teams. But man, I'm happy for a guy like Bob Dice, because last year everybody was, calling for Bob Dice's head. You had people saying this guy shouldn't be coaching in the league. Well, I want to hear what those people have to say now, right? Because Bob Dice, and the funny thing is that when Ottawa came to town to BC prior to that crazy last 2.5 minutes, I remember talking to a couple of the players that I know with the team. I was down at field level, and they said, we've got the right guy. This guy's going to turn it around. We believe in him. We've got the right guy. And I wish some people would have done their homework and actually talked to some of the players, because they would have found out that the players really believe in Bob Dice. And I think you're starting to see it now with a team that's winning football games and looking good in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I won't go so far as to say elite. I don't think they are there. I think that there is somewhere in the range of possibilities for this team 2 or 3 years down the road. Elite is one of them. Like, Drew Brown just totally figures it out, and this is the Ottawa Red Blacks league, and we are just living in it. But this is a good, improved football team. I like what Bob said there, that Coach Dice absolutely needs to get some of the recognition here. I know when he exited from Saskatchewan, there was some people a little bit upset because that was a good footballing mind that was on his way out the door. And I look at this team as one that still hasn't totally figured out its full identity yet. And I look at how they're still able to win these games. And then the big thing for me, this defense was so easy to pass on last year. Like, if you wanted your best game, you just air it out deep. It's, again, another Madden reference, but it's like when you're first playing Madden and it's just, all right, go route, go route, go route. We're just throwing it deep. It's Al Davis throwing it deep, baby. That's how you attacked Ottawa. They have at least limited that and shut down Calgary last week to hold them to just 6 points. So that part of it has been figured out. Drew Brown, I think, has all of the tools to be a very good quarterback in this league. I think that there's some refining that needs to be done, but I do look at this team as one that certainly can compete for a home playoff game. And we know that the fans in Ottawa can get after it if the games are important. So that they could all of a sudden find themselves playing for a championship that is within the range of outcomes. So yeah, this is, like Bob said, a good football team out in Ottawa.
Joey, I'm not saying this is all Zach Collaros' fault, but are there Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans that are saying, boy, it really sucks that we let Drew Brown go?
That was happening as he was being let go, just knowing that, Zach is aging and he didn't have the best finish to last season. And last season, we really started to see some of the glaring issues that are growing, more interceptions being thrown. He's taken some hard hits. I mean, even last game, he had to get taken out by the spotter again, so he seemed like a really secure option. The problem is, he's the highest paid guy on the team. He has led you, to the Grey Cup literally every year he's been here. So it's hard to come off your starting quarterback and then offer a guy who's clearly emerging, the kind of money he would need to go play. And I think everybody is happy for Drew because he's not in the Western Conference, so you can kind of enjoy him from afar. And Bob Dice, I mean, he was a pleasure to deal with here in Winnipeg when he was the coordinator here. And a lot of people wanted to see him here get that head coaching job, obviously not replace O'Shea, but elsewhere. I mean, I think people were happy for him, think it's well-deserving. In fact, his daughter, Brooklyn, good football player too. She's like the quarterback and kicker, I think, for the local women's team here. But anyway, the Dice family very liked here. But yeah, it's tough to see him go. But let's be honest here. I think they're obviously in contention for playoffs. You can sneak them into the conversation for, Grey Cup possibilities, but nothing really pops to me on this team. I mean, you look statistically, they're kind of middle of the pack in all statistical categories. Drew Brown playing well. I have it written down here. Yeah, he's got 67% passing rate, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. This is a team that's building. I think they're off to a good start, but to Bob's point, they're nowhere near Montreal. When they played Montreal, they lost by 26 points. Like, to me, that right there is a perfect example of just the separation between 1 and 2. I think sometimes when you get this kind of success early, we're a want it now society, right? Even going back to the last conversation about Davis Alexander, we're so quick to be like, oh, he's great or whatever after a half of football. Let's let this pan out, right? They're off to a good start. They're in second place, was at 5-2. They have not played great on the road. All their 4 wins are at home. So I need to see them play better on the road for sure. And I need to see them play better against teams that are good, right? I mean, they had back home and home with the Elks. They were close games, but they narrowly escaped that. Again, going back to that one against Montreal where they lost by 26. They're 1-1 against Winnipeg. They lost here in Winnipeg in front of a decent crowd, right? Where you start talking about 30-ish thousand people making noise. So I like what they're doing. I think it's a good start. I wouldn't count them out, but I think this is just a really good start. And if adversity hits, you might see people pulling back a little bit if they, lose a couple and string a few losses here and get closer to 500. But let's call it what it is. It's a good start. You're in a good position, but there's still plenty of time to go.
Bob, is there anything, and Joey kind of rubbed on that there. Mind you, here I took grade 13 math twice, but by my calculations, their opponents that they've played against have a combined record of 15-29. What does that mean to you? Or does it mean anything? Or you just win your games that you got to play?
Just play who's on the schedule, right? You're the guy. If you knew that stat, 15-29, why are you calling them elite, Bubba? What are you trying to do? Bait us? I mean, come on. They're 15 and okay. I mean, again, it's to what Joey said and what Peter said. They're a good team right now. They've won the games that they're supposed to, but again, let's see them. And they had a test in Montreal and they got blown out. So are they an elite team? No, but they're a good team right now, and they've proven it with the wins that they have. And let's see what's down the road as well. They just can't sit on their laurels right now. They have to keep building. And at some point, beat one of the better teams, whether it's Saskatchewan, BC, or Montreal during the course of the season, if you want to even talk about them being elite.
Well,
Bob,
and
I wouldn't
you look
expect
at
you to bite that bait from Bubba. You're too good of a veteran. You've been in too long to bite that bait. Leave the Bubba bait.
It's called the play action pass, right? Like, you show and then go deep, right? Is that what you do?
Yeah, all of a sudden he brought in Tre Ford to run a wildcat on us, and when we just didn't know what to do there. But to that point, the first game Montreal won last year against a team with a winning record was in the Eastern Final. They didn't do anything against good teams until the 2 biggest games of the year. And I'm not saying that Drew Brown is going to go out and Cody Fajardo this thing, but this schedule that they've had has allowed Brown and the coaching staff out in Ottawa to kind of figure out a few of the things that he does that they need to work on. I think he stares down his primary receiver a little bit too much. And if I've noticed that, every defensive mind in the Canadian Football League will have noticed that as well. That's something that they now have seen on tape for 6-7 weeks, and they can now adjust to that. And the other part of it that I think gives me a little bit of optimism here for Ottawa is it wasn't just Drew Brown who was an offseason acquisition. They brought in Dominic Rhymes as well, and he hasn't really got going in the way that they thought, but there's a little bit of chemistry there. And so I wonder, like what we talked about before with Tim White, with Bo Levi Mitchell, White gets a couple of touchdowns last week. Maybe he's starting to go. Maybe this is Rhymes starting to get going as well, and it just unlocks a bit more of a primary option in that passing game instead of Pimpleton running around like he has the speed burst just locked down the whole time. I think if you can have a real primary receiver like we know Rhymes can be, then this really gets this team into an interesting spot. Again, not elite, but a good football team.
Lorenzo Molden, though, on defense, that's a guy. Like, that guy is a disruptor. I really like the way that guy plays.
He's a dude, as they say, the modern football vernacular. He's a dude.
He is a dude. All right, we'll start with you, Joey, here. We've got some just unbelievable matchups this week. BC at Winnipeg, Montreal at Hamilton, Edmonton at Sask, Toronto at Calgary. Game of the week is?
All right. My game, before I go to the game of the week, I'm going to classify this real quick. The BC, Winnipeg, and Montreal Hamilton games are prove-it games to me. You know, Winnipeg has a good chance to kind of turn their season around, build some momentum if they can build Vancouver. There's been some rivalries there, particularly in the Western Finals, to build on. Same with Hamilton, right? You're on a 2-game win streak, and you go to Montreal and make it 3 against the top team. Great games to watch. For me, the Toronto-Calgary is probably the most pertinent in terms of how either team could really affect their spot in the standings as they sit middle of the pack. But to me, it's that Edmonton game. I know it sounds weird, but I want to see Tre Ford get the start and go up against a defense like Saskatchewan's and see what he's able to do. And again, I am buying the hype on that in terms of wanting to watch and see where this goes. I have no preconceived notions. I'm not saying that Tre Ford's going to go on and be great or anything like that, but I want to see what he can do in a full game scenario against a good defense. And that one is on the road too. So maybe that's a little easier for him. I know it hasn't been great at home for the Elks, but to get one on the road in Saskatchewan, which I assume will be a pretty ruckus crowd, I want to see how he plays there. But honestly, not a bad game on the schedule for me this week.
I believe the Elks' last win was in Saskatchewan at Mosaic Field with Tre Ford under center.
Oh, man. Will history repeat itself?
We'll see. Bob, game of the week is?
I think all 4 games to me are very appealing. And the one that I'm really interested in is our game in Winnipeg. I mean, BC wins that game. They got the season series, and they distance themselves clearly from the Bombers. For me, and here's the thing. Bombers played a good football game last time out against the Argos. I mean, the only thing, they turn the ball over. They don't turn over the football. They win that game probably by maybe 2-3 touchdowns. So this game scares me. Even though it's a short week for Winnipeg and BC's coming off the bye, Winnipeg's always a tough place to play. It's going to be a very interesting game. And I'm also interested to see what if Tre Ford gets that start against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, what he does against that defense. And here's the thing about Saskatchewan. If you win the turnover battle against the Riders, you'll probably win the game. I mean, that holds true a lot in just about any case, but especially with the Riders, because they're so dependent on getting turnovers and short fields for their offense. So that's another one that intrigues me. And can Hamilton keep it rolling? So yeah, a lot of interesting games on the docket this week.
Bob, over their history, and since you've been with the club and calling games, are the Lions good coming off the bye week?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, you're rested. You're. I mean, if you look at the stats that Steve Daniels puts out, he puts out the numbers, but the Lions are pretty. I think Winnipeg is unbelievable off the bye week. The last time I checked their numbers, but the Lions have decent numbers off the bye week as well.
All right, Peter.
Yeah, just to echo what everyone was saying, like that there isn't really a dud in the bunch this week. Tre Ford going to Saskatchewan. I know this Mosaic doesn't really have the same reputation as old Mosaic Taylor Field used to have, of being just a house of horrors for people to go to. But a Saturday night in Regina is still a really tough place for a young quarterback to go into. So that one intrigues me. But I do think maybe it's just like playing off of reputation. But BC Winnipeg is also my pick for game of the week. I think these were the clear-cut 2 top teams in the West last season, and they were in just a bare-knuckle brawl to finish first in that division, and what that meant, either playing the West Final indoors in Vancouver or out in the elements in Winnipeg, and we all saw how that all played out. And so I wonder if it is a bit of a wake-up, like, hey, for Winnipeg, like we used to be at this level and maybe even above that level, and now we're not. How do we get that back on track? And for BC, like Bob said, that is a chance to just have them done and buried, and just not even have to worry about that. So that one would be mine. But I do think maybe an honorable mention to Toronto against Calgary, just because how important that is. Calgary just got whooped on by Ottawa to the point where Bubs is calling them elite. So that's what Calgary did. They were Iron Mike Sharp as the enhancement talent, going out there and making Macho Man Randy Savage look like a superstar.
Ooh, yeah.
So we need to bounce that back a little bit.
There you go.
Ooh, yeah. And for Toronto, yes, they won, but I don't know if they came out of that game being like, man, we crushed it. They need to figure out a few things as well. So that is a really, really important game on Sunday night out here at McMahon. But I do think the game of the week is Winnipeg against the BC Lions.
Let me flex my Ontario bias here. And I'll throw this to each one of you guys at this point. Is the East better than the West right now? Right back to you, Joey.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned that, I think, in my first, when we were talking about Bo Levi. It does feel like the power is shifting over to the East. It seems a little more competitive, a little stronger. Montreal, I think last year they won the Grey Cup. We weren't really sure. Was it luck, because of how they went about and won it? And Cody Fajardo, what seemed like was playing beyond himself, especially in the playoffs. But now we're seeing that maybe this team is for real. And, Hamilton is, even as we were talking about, they're in the basement right now. They started 0-5, but now they've strung together 2 wins. Things seem to be humming along a little bit. It just seems like there's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Parity in the East, with the exception of Montreal. But I'm not going to say it's like by and large better. I don't think it's a big discrepancy, because Vancouver's still really strong. The Bombers, bad start to the season, but again, I kind of feel like if you're going to have a bad season, it's probably better to have it this year than next year when you're hosting the Grey Cup. But yeah, it's I do feel like the East has gotten to be the stronger conference this season.
Bob, your thoughts?
I agree with that. If I'm looking at it on a 10-point scale, I'd probably say the East is maybe like at 6 and the West is at 4. That could change as the season progresses, but right now I would lean, I should say, towards the Eastern Conference, particularly with what Ottawa has done. And you're right, Hamilton's on a little bit of a roll. Maybe that's just some recency bias with your Tiger Cats there, Bubs, but I think Ottawa is the team that you look at and say things have kind of shifted because of the way they've got off to the start of the season, and you look at some of the struggles that some of the teams in the West have had.
Just one final thing here, Peter. I got to throw this to you here, and it's the one team we really haven't talked a lot about, and that's Calgary. They got pumped pretty good there by Ottawa, but that was on a short week. They had played. They actually looked tired to me. I thought. I don't know. I don't know what to make of the Stampeders. Are they a good team or are they not? Are they reliable? Is Jake Mayer the guy? Every time I think about Calgary, I just don't know what I think about them.
That's a pretty common thought out here too. It does feel like the title of this year's, like how they used to have the year-end DVDs. The title of this year's one would be the 2024 Calgary Stampeders. What did we just watch? Because we really don't know what this team is. And you look back the last couple of weeks, that game against Winnipeg, we've talked about how much Winnipeg's offense has struggled. Not against Calgary, it didn't. That was 41 points, and the Stampeders had a chance to win that game and just couldn't get a stop. Then they go out and play the BC Lions, and BC had about 15 different opportunities to win that game, and just they happened to play what was probably, and Bob can speak to this better than I could, probably their worst game of the season in that one, and still almost beat the Stampeders. And so, yes, like they looked tired. They looked bagged in that game, but the problem is they didn't look all that different from how they have looked all season long. And out here in Calgary, talking about the Bo Levi Mitchell glory years, we are used to this team being consistent and used to it. Just you can pencil them in for 12, 13 wins and just have them be able to ride off into whatever heartbreaking playoff loss they were going to have. But that they were at least going to be that consistent team, and it didn't matter who got hurt. It was just next man up. They had defensive linemen playing offensive line, and Bo Levi Mitchell was still winning MOPs. And so now fans out here are having a bit of an adjustment to seeing a very inconsistent brand of football. If you were to put everyone best on best and you allowed these teams to just go out there and gave them some serum where they just reach their pinnacle powers, I still think this is like the 4th best team in the West Division. Like I don't think this is an overly great football team. I think they're just kind of, as the kids would say, mid this season. And so you see that with some nights they look like world beaters. Other nights they are, as I said, WWF enhancement talent. That's just kind of what comes with being an average football team. And that's what they are right now.
You know what, guys, a la Roberto Luongo, I love to pump the tires of the CFL this week because of the amazing guys that we were able to attract, to bring in. You guys were fabulous this week. Great opinion, a little fun, lots of facts as well, too, and no holes bar opinions as well, too. So thank you so much for coming in and joining us. And obviously, if people want to contact you and rip you or agree with you, Bob, where can they find you?
Wow. Holy Jesus, Bubs. Now I know why Cadeau did the appearance at the start of the show. It's trade deadline day, Bubs. You've just been dealt to the Argos for a 6th-round pick out of Ryerson. Sorry, bud.
Sixth round.
I'm surprised he didn't get pulled midway through and let Butko finish. Man, it's nice knowing you, Bubs. At the Real Moj on Instagram, at the Real Moj on Twitter.
I enjoy taking this abuse. I really do. Thanks for joining us, Bob. This will be your final appearance.
No problem.
I got enough pull. Joey, Joey, seeing you're one of our new guys, you just replaced Bob, so thank you.
Oh, well, it's an absolute honor. I hope I don't get traded for a 6th-round pick from the university formerly known as Ryerson. But no, if you're looking to get a hold of me, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, Facebook, all at Joey Slattery. That's Slattery with 2 T's. TV at Joey Slattery TV. Do a lot of my work doing game reports on Instagram, things like that. So check it out and get into. Leave some comments or some DMs if you have to get in anything with it. I'd love to hash it out.
Pete?
Well, I want it to be known we offered a 5th-round pick, but they wanted to keep you out east. So just so you know, I loved you, but whatever. No, I am at Primetime Klein on Twitter and Instagram because when you get a nickname at 17 and make social media handles out of it, you have to then say it when you're 34 years old, and it doesn't ring quite as well. But yeah, I am at Primetime Klein, Twitter, Instagram, and my podcast, Couch Potato Diary. A lot more CFL stuff like this, without the pesky facts that they were bringing up. It's mainly just the jokes that I bring. But I do that several times a week wherever you get your podcast.
Well, enjoy your next Madden game, please. Enjoy your next Madden game, folks.
No punting.
No punting, folks. The CFL this week comes to you every week on the Ticats Audio Network. That is certainly always loaded with CFL and Tiger Cats related programming. Please hit that thumbs up and subscribe button and drop us a 5-star rating because we appreciate it. Because we appreciate you. Time for me to hop in my convertible Mercedes. It's a beautiful day out in Southern Ontario. I'm going to ride off into the sunset. This is the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Let's kick it off soon on the Ticats Audio Network.